All right, well, that worked out. So, all right, Chris. At some point, I'm going to start expecting overreactions. So I've been getting involved in a lot of pots. This is basically what I'm trying to force is start forcing overreactions. We actually have a hand, so if I do get resistance, this is definitely going to be in my defend. We're just going to see what happens.
40.
All right, so this is probably a cusp hand for me in this spot here. I think if I'm definitely raising King Jack off. King 10 off is a little bit on the iffy side, playing out of position here. I don't want to start instilling a calling range just yet. I might do that at some point later on. I think this hand plays kind of a little tough out of position. I'm dominated by a lot of his calling range, King Jacks, Queen Jacks, King Queen, etc. So I'm going to release this one.
Well, Waka Flocka just came on my headphones, so I'm really hoping I have a hand to go off against Fausto here. Just the blade, huh? Just aces on King 4 deuce?
We'll see on the tape.
Well, Chin wants our dynamic, me and Fausto, to be riddled with animosity and rivalry, but at Elite Academy, they called him Old Dust and me New Dust on the graphics. And then day 2, they called me New Protege and him Old Protege. And so it's an interesting dynamic that really just stems from Fausto being Chin's first intensive student and me being the second.
Are we here? Are we here?
Are you guys here?
I'm being dealt out, man. I've had Jack 6 no fewer than 7 times.
Pretty clear open here. Probably going to open somewhere around 40%. Usually I would open more, but given that I have a tough opponent in the small blind.
Ready. Okay, I have a clear continue here with my hand. Finally, I get the VPIP. I like to 3-bet this hand more than call, I believe. I actually would start constructing my flat call range as far as offsuit broadblades go with the weaker ones. So I think I'd be more inclined to call like King 10, Jack 10, Queen 10, Queen Jack, King Jack. Hands of that class, I suppose. Ace 10 stands to dominate a lot of Chris's opening range here. And we're just going to be pushing a fair amount of equity, even the times that he defends. It also shifts very naturally into a 5-bet bluff, should he be choosing to 4-bet, and I think he's getting on a line. So I'm going to choose a size here, a little bit more in the polar nature since I am out of position. I'm going to go to 175.
175 is the bet.
Okay. So, Chris opens to 30. Matt 3-bets to 175. His bet is pulled. I think he's likely doing this with a lot of his suited wheel aces and a lot of the top end of his range. I have blockers for the top end, so I think this is typically would be a decent candidate to call. I can't really see 4-betting here. I believe Chris is relatively wide. If I flat here, I think that Chris is likely either going to come along with a wider part of his range, which I think I have a good chunk of dominated. it almost seems like this is just a little too good of an opportunity to pass up the play-in position against Matt as well. I'm going to opt to call.
Well, this is interesting. I was just going to say how facing this size, I think that I can continue with my better performing hands, like Jack 10 suited, 10 9 suited pairs. Given that Queen 8 ranks relatively low, especially facing this big of a 3-bet, and knowing that Berkey has flats out of the small blind, if he was playing a binary strategy of strictly 3-betting or folding, then a 4-bet or a peel is a better option. But I think that he's constructing a mix. Up against a 3-bet and a cold call range, just ranks too low.
Okay, so the cold call by Chris here is, I wouldn't go so far as to say peculiar. I would just say more so that it's complicated. So if he's 4-betting, which is very reasonable, he'll be constructed in a very polar manner. It's difficult to work in a linear 4-bet here. What I mean by that is to take your middling equity hands like King, Queen, pocket 9s, pocket 8s, something to that nature, and begin cold 4ing. Now, that's not to say that's not profitable. Of course it is. It's certainly making money versus a button open and a small blind 3-bet. So he's kind of creating a situation where he's delaying the resistance point of the hand. So rather than basically making all the difficult decisions pre-flop, he's allowing himself the ability to utilize a positional edge should Chris fold, which is what happened, to kind of complicate the hand for me now moving forward post. I don't mind working this in sometimes. Obviously, he is a student, so I kind of have an idea how he's going to begin constructing. I think that he probably has less coverage on the king than would be necessarily perceived. As far as 4-bet bluffs go, King, Queen, and like hands like King, Jack are kind of the nuts for that. So I do expect him to have hands like Jacks, 9s, 8s, 7s, and then perhaps like some Ace X that I dominate and some Ace X that dominates me. So like some Ace Jack, Ace Queen, but also like some Ace 7 through Ace 9 suited type holdings. I don't think I get a C-bet through here, and my hand isn't going to barrel very well, but it is like the bottom of my bluff catching range, so I think I can very comfortably start off with a check. I do have kings full in my range. He's less likely to. So this flop should go check, check a lot, and we should be able to then play future streets accordingly.
Okay, so Matt checks. I think that this is kind of the plan that we started with, was positional advantage with our call. Makes it really tough for Chris to call pre with a 3-bet and a cold call range. We flop, of course, I think what is pretty obviously the best hand in the spot. I'm seeing Matt show up here with a lot of his 3-bets probably being connectors of some sort on the high to mid end, as well as some pairs, 7s, 8s, things like that. I'm going to go ahead and lead out on this. I'm going to bet 200.
200?
All right, so Chris is going to choose a size of 200 into 380. This is a little bit on the larger side. It's honestly fine for what's effectively a 4-bet pot, but he doesn't really have 3 street hands here very often. Of course, he could be trapping with aces, kings, sometimes ace king, but we block the aces and the ace king. King's full isn't really incentivized to go big. He does, of course, want to start protecting hands like queens, jacks, 10s, 9s, 8s if they're in his range. But I think he can do so for a smaller size, since I also have similar hands in my range. Again, he very well could have king, queen, but I don't really think that that serves him as a 3-street hand, particularly when I do have the viability here to both check raise and just be sticky through multiple streets. So I'm actually going to continue through a call. Dependent upon the turn texture, I may bluff catch twice. I don't really think I'm going to be in a situation to turn this hand into a bluff. I don't really think he has a lot of bluffing candidates outside of like exactly queen jack, and maybe he has hands like jack 10 of diamonds. I think I have the 10 of clubs, so jack 10 of diamonds, jack 10 of, no, I have the 10 of spades. So he could have jack 10 of diamonds, jack 10 of clubs. He could have queen 10 of diamonds, queen 10 of clubs, queen jack in all 3 suits. And then he might also just even bet the queen jack of hearts here to try to stab and win. I have a very clear call, I think, as the bulk of my range would want to choose. And then dependent upon turns, I may continue through another call.
Okay, so Matt's call, he's in realization, I believe, so he's still trying to, he has some equity in this hand, and he's obviously, we're moving towards showdown. I have a couple options here. I think that in retrospect, I probably bet a little bit big with my particular holding on this flop. I do want to continue because I think that I'm able to capitalize on my equity that I have here. I think that the possibility he's tripped up on this type of board, and if he has any like that, it's. I believe he thinks that he's maybe have some hands that are blocking some of my holdings in this particular holding. I've taken kind of a weird line with Queen King, but I think that another bet on this turn is likely going to either see. I think it will see either. I think they'll see a fold, to be honest, and I want to keep ranges relatively wide because I'd like to get a little more value. So I'm going to bet a little bit smaller sizing, but I'm still going to bet with the intent of getting another street after this. So we're going to bet 325.
325.
All right, I really like this sizing by Chris. He doesn't really have a plethora of bluffs available, so I was gonna have a real decision if he had chosen to bet like pot, and that decision basically would be how imbalanced is he? Would he be betting pot with his value hands trying to rep that he's bluffing at too high of a frequency, or would he only be betting pot with his actual bluffs? I think I would have just arrived that he would have been trying to level me, and ultimately I would have folded. When he chooses a size of 325, which is a little under half pot, it allows him to be betting more hands. He could technically still be betting a hand like queens or jacks, though I think it's largely a mistake, at least without the queen of clubs in hand. Reducing my king, queen of club combinations is probably pretty critical. This is close. I do have the ace of clubs, which means that he has no nut flush draws here. His logical bluffs are going to be queen 10 of clubs, queen jack of clubs, jack 10 of clubs, 10 9 of clubs, and so on, depending on how wide he's cold calling with suited connectors. So we're looking at something in the range of 4 to 8 logical bluffs. His value hands are going to be, let's give him half the combos of aces, so 1.5. Same thing with kings for 3 total combos. We'll say like half the ace king, so maybe let's give him like 5 or 6 combos of ace king for 9. And then he could be making some accidental value bets with like ace jack clubs. No, I have the ace clubs, sorry. I guess with just like ace jack high, ace queen high. But I'm not really sure what he would be targeting at that point. He also could be making some thin value bets with like queens or jacks. So we'll give him like half combos of each of those for another 6 combos. So we're looking at something in the neighborhood of like 15 combinations of value versus 4 to 8 combos of bluffs. So he's at like a 3 to 1 or 2 to 1 value to bluff combo, and I'm getting laid pretty much the exact right price for this. I think I'm gonna have to continue one more, and I may ultimately have to call on a non-club, non-queen, non-jack river.
Okay.
Okay, so Matt called my turn bet. I did size it a little bit under half, and definitely hoping for the value call there. I'm starting to think that if he's near the top of his range, he's going to be, I may be in the very unlikely spot dominated here, but it's just so rare that happens. I'm definitely leaning towards a bet here rather than checking back. The jacks definitely just like smash me, and I think that it's definitely something that I could rep, especially in this spot. I'm gonna bet out. I'm going to choose a bit larger sizing. Now that I'm thinking through this, I'm thinking around what spots is he check calling all the way through to river, and am I going to get value? Does he have queens, or is he near the top of his range here where he's just check calling begrudgingly with bigger holdings like tens, queens? We're gonna put out another bet, and we're gonna go. We're just gonna go 1,000 even.
1,000.
Okay, obviously I have a fold now at this point. Again, Chris's size is pretty good. It's consistent with ace, king, aces. I suppose he could have some king, jack, though I think he'd be getting a little thin. Also, he could have some jacks, but again, I think he would be getting a little thin, having bet the turn with either of those combinations. King, jack's obviously better than jacks, but I very well could just take this line with ace, king, or aces myself, particularly when I have the ace of clubs, which in this instance I do. I think I could have, I think it would have been mandatory for me to turn my hand into a bluff on a queen of club, jack of club, 10 of club river, as that would have drastically reduced the amount of combinations of flushes that he could have, and pretty much put him in a position where he could only call off with full houses. Now the challenge would be that I would have to take this line through a check shove line, pretty much. And he may just like check down a hand like king queen at that point, or pocket tens, whatever the case may be. So he chooses a size of 1,000 here into roughly 1300. Pretty good, pretty in line with strong top pair. Again, at this point, I think his only real bluff combinations are Queen 10 of clubs, 10 9 of clubs. I suppose he could be opportunistic with hands like Queen 10 of diamonds, Queen 10 of spades. Or no, I have 10 of spades. So Queen 10 of diamonds, 10 9 of diamonds, hands like that. But I think that's probably pushing it. He very well could be bluffing with the best hand like ace queen. He also just rivers me a lot with queen jack, ace jack, hands along those lines. So ultimately, you're gonna have to arrive at a fold.
Gonna open.
Ready?
Queen of clubs, jack of hearts is going to be a hand I'm going to V-pip through a call. This is a hand I do like to incorporate a lot of leads on certain flops. So we're going to incorporate this through the call. 3-betting this is not ideal. I think that it's one of those hands that just doesn't function well through that tree. So we're going to choose the call option. This is a board that I'm going to actually do that on and put them into some tough spots. Actually, we're going to choose the check call and then lead some certain cards. I expect him to check back a lot, which then I would overbet. If he chooses to bet, I'm going to check call, lead like a 7, lead small on like the jack, etc. So let's begin with a check.
So the way that I am constructing on these types of boards is using my stronger ace highs as a check back and within the showdown region. And I'm going to be c-betting my king highs and my queen highs more often, targeting the basically full combinations of ace highs that he's defending from the big blind. But with this specific hand, I don't really have a target. I would merely be betting to deny equity, but that certainly isn't the primary function of the hand. Also, when we turn an ace, we just have him outkicked a lot of the time, or a queen, and we retain all of those combinations, obviously, through checking back. So, gonna check.
Well, good luck, buddy. You're gonna start holding some fucking heat now. Queen of clubs in my hand blocks his turn continues, so we're gonna choose the turn overbet option. Pot now at 65, so he's gonna be facing 1.75x pot roughly. So let's begin with a bet of 105.
So this bet makes a lot of sense for Chin. He understands that I'm landing in the showdown portion of my range and that my bluff catchers are pretty inelastic. The 7 favors his range. So I think that we are looking at a pretty clean bluffing region of like 5, 6, queen jack, hands that unblock my showdown region. This bet really cages my range because he's presenting a pole against my cap. Given that I fall relatively low in my bluff catching region, I think facing a bet of 1.5 x pot, I can let this one go. Conrad giving away my action. Show one.
Were you confused?
No.
Good. Well, the difference is that between me and Fausto, it's less obvious what the meta is going to be because we don't necessarily speak poker anymore as frequently. Whereas me and Chris K, he has a very modern update of my strategy. So I have to start thinking in levels of what is he gonna think based on what he knows about me, which is always very confusing as it pertains to playing against my own student. And so I end up having to kind of revert back to baseline as often as I can. And I think that's perfectly fine.
Okay, this isn't necessarily a hand that I would say that I'm V-pipping at a high frequency first to enter a pot, but in this particular environment, I do want to try to play more hands. So far I've been dealt pretty much out, and I'm happy to kind of put myself in some tough spots. So this is really my first opportunity to even open a hand in any capacity, so I haven't had a chance to actually flesh out my opening strategy. Given that I expect this table to be relatively hyper-aggressive, I think I can kind of calm them a bit by opening larger. And I actually expect their ranges to be relatively inelastic, particularly Fausto and Chin. I think I am going to go with the 5x strategy here, despite the fact that I very rarely employ this anymore. Usually I'm more in the 2.5 to 3.5 range. But I'd like to see how much chaos this creates and what the reactions are.
50.
So it's interesting. I was actually thinking about bumping it up myself to 50. Just because I think the dynamic might start changing soon into people already warmed up, ready to fight. Another way to change the dynamics is with constant frequency and bigger sizings. Berkey already beat me to it, so I'm just gonna react normal based on the incentive of my hand. Just simply call, and then we'll see what happens going forward.
Berkey chooses the 5x strategy. He switches to that. I think, obviously my hand is going to be a continue. However, in a general sense, I think what Berkey will attempt to try to do here is try to cause some sort of disruption to the game. I think the correct counter is going to be mostly to just truncate your range every time he opens. Don't necessarily call with suited connectors, mostly play a very polarizing strategy where we're going to be pretty pair dense and very dense to suited Broadway region, some of which is incentivized to 3-bet given the fact that he's putting more money out there. So we're incentivized to call less and 3-bet more. However, my exact hand doesn't necessarily do that too well, so I'm just going to continue through a V-pip, through a call. There is an argument to just fold my hand, but I think Berkey's just going to make some mistakes. I'm also on the button, so I'm just going to choose to call. I think some percentage of the time, like, Fausto's hand is going to be pair dense, so I can't always just like stack off once he starts getting aggressive, because that could be oversetted. So this is just a hand that I have to proceed with caution, even when I do flop a set, versus some pretty strong ranges, which I expect that to be the case, given that Berkey opened to 5x and faced the field call.
Call.
So this is an interesting spot. I have a clear, I think I could do both here. I think two options are on the table, either calling or squeezing. And with this much dead money out there, I think squeezing actually becomes a little bit, the opportunity to win a lot more is out there, but if one person calls, then I'm in a really crappy spot out of position. But this hand doesn't really play that well 4 or 5 ways out of position. So I'm actually going to put a squeeze in here. I'm going to want to go big. So Berkey opened to 50, and with Fausto and Chin calling, I'm going to want to go somewhere in the 7 or 8x range. So I'm going to make it 350.
350.
I'll be interested to see the hands here, first and foremost. Obviously, I have a very clear fold. I'm at the absolute stone bottom of my range, but the fact that this pot went 4 ways for a 5x open, you know, they could all just have hands, but it kind of, at least anecdotally, confirms my suspicions that these ranges are rather inelastic. People are going to be fighting here. I'm going to have plenty of hands that are going to allow me to make plays back at Lukic here whenever he's squeezing. You know, he has to risk a lot here. He has to risk a lot to vie to pick up 150. And, you know, I don't doubt that he has a pretty good hand, but it's challenging to not overbluff his spot whenever you see $160 dead in the middle with the opportunity to push through with like a blocker type hand. So if he shows up with a hand like ace-10 off, I wouldn't be shocked, and more power to him.
So I'm gonna view this in a simple perspective that Lukic hasn't played that much. It's a polarizing scenario, polarizing sizing, so I'm just gonna fall into believing that he's in the polarizing aspect of his range. I do have a hand that could try to set mine, and we're almost basically deep enough that the 300 extra investment should make it basically break even profitable. Not gonna do that given that it's pretty close. If Berk were to call, I would have overcalled myself, given that the odds are gonna be more in my favor for my specific hand, plus being a multi-way pot of potentially 4 people would have given me a better chance that when I do hit my set, that it's pretty easy for me to get paid off. But since it's not shaping out that way, I'm just gonna get rid of this.